Timothee Chalamet, actor, probably best known for his roles in films like Call Me By Your Name, Little Women, Beautiful Boy, and Dune. Timothy hasn't been on the scene too long, he's 28, and his first big project was in 2014, but he's already made such a huge impact and I think will be seen as one of the greats of this time. So it's pretty clear based on the title, but I watched every movie Timothee Chalamet has been in. I'll be splitting this series into 3 parts. This video I'll be talking about Timothy's earliest projects and what I'm calling his unknown era. I'll also walk you through everything on his filmography, but I'm only going to go out of my way to watch all of his movies, not necessarily the shorts or TV episodes. He has 34 items on his IMDb page, 22 of those are movies. Before I get into everything, I first want to talk about my experience with Timothy before this project. Along with probably most people, I'm more familiar with his recent work, but I love him so much. He's so talented. I think he's one of the best actors of this generation. And on a more personal level, I also love his look. He looks super unique, and I'm just gonna say what we're all thinking. He's handsome. Okay, I said it. Let's go through his resume. Fashion icon. Source, Wikipedia. Sex symbol. Source, Wikipedia. Trademarks. Chiseled jaw. Source, IMDb. And hair icon. Source, me. But also Wikipedia. What are you doing? You need to add this to his resume. And I also love what we see of his personality. I've also been fascinated with his filmography because the projects that he chooses to give his time and craft to seem very highly curated, which is different to me when comparing to most other actors that seem to just pick up whatever comes their way. He also seems super thoughtful and intellectual when speaking about the films he's in and his roles in them, but I'm also interested in seeing how he got his start and seeing his acting journey over time. So the main purpose of this video would be to highlight or summarize Timothy's roles in all of these movies, show any high or low points, and give you all an idea of whether it's worth it to watch as a Timothy fan. I think what I'm going to call this video or this series is Fangirl, because I am a fangirl. This just gives me an opportunity to talk about Timothy and eventually other actors and actresses that I love. So I'll focus a lot on Timothy's roles in these films, but I'm also going to give mini reviews on the films as well. I'll give 2 ratings for each of the films. The first rating will be Timothy factor. 1 Timothy dab means either he wasn't in it very much or I didn't enjoy his performance. Unlikely, but I'm leaving the option open. 5 Timothy dabs would mean it's one of his best performances. I'll also give a peach rating out of 5 for my general enjoyment of the film. First, some disclaimers. There will be some vague spoilers. I'm trying to keep spoilers limited since most of you won't have seen all of these movies, but I just want to put that warning out there. And just a reminder that this is my opinion, so remember to always be nice and respectful in the comments. And that's it. I'm going to get started with talking about Timothy's filmography now. The first item on Timothy's IMDb page is called Sweet Tooth, and there's not much information that I can find on it. It's also known as Butcher's Hill. It's a horror short film from 2008. Timothy would have been around 12 when this came out. I would love to watch this, but I can't find it anywhere, at least on a legitimate website, and I'm paranoid and I'm not about to click on sketchy links for this. I was able to find a short clip of it on TikTok, so you might be able to find it there if you're interested. I'll read you the synopsis that is on IMDb. Young Sam and his sister Edwina are hiding in the garden of an isolated cottage, and upon entering the cottage, they find some tempting cakes in the kitchen. This short is apparently 10 minutes long. It sounds like this is a take on Hansel and Gretel. There's 3 people listed in the cast: Timothy, Jackie Rhodes, and Tate Steinseich. At this time, Timothée was credited as Timothee Chalamet. This short was written and directed by Rory Kindersley and Jason Noto. Unfortunately, that's all I can really say about this one. I can't judge it at all based off of the 30-second clip that I have access to, but he does look like an adorable little baby here, so that's always fun to see. Next, Timothy did another horror short film, this time called Clown. This was released during the same year as the previous one in 2008. The short film is 6 minutes long. I was able to find this on YouTube, but the quality is pretty bad. I don't really see any way to explain this short without giving away the whole thing, so beware of spoilers for this 6-minute short film if you care. The short film is basically split in 2 parts. In the first part, we see a boy, played by Timothee, being held captive by 2 clowns. The boy turns himself into a clown and then kills the 2 adult clowns. Then we get the title card halfway through. Then we see a band of clowns and freaks ride along in a wagon. They approach a church, and the main clown kills the priest, and it's revealed that this clown is the same kid from the first part. I didn't like the short very much. It was only 6 minutes though, so it wasn't hard to sit through. I did appreciate the unique style at certain times in the short. I also found it to be decently creepy. I find that indie or low-budget horror is often scarier for me than mainstream horror is. I haven't seen it, but the second half of this short seemed to be referencing the 1932 film Freaks. The short surprisingly has some notable people in it, including Peter Green from The Mask and Pulp Fiction, and a pre-Walking Dead Norman Reedus. I couldn't really tell which one was Norman Reedus, but I think I heard him at one point.
Stranger, sometimes fate happens itself upon you. Stranger no more.
Peter Green played Clown, Timothee Chalamet played Clown Boy, and Norman Reedus played Lucien. The short was written and directed by Tate Steinseich, who worked with Timothee on Sweet Tooth. As for Timothee's contribution, there isn't much content to work with. We mostly see him make the same face over and over again while being taunted by the 2 clowns, which I would think is more of an editing problem. I didn't even think it was him for the longest time. I still don't really see it, but I do see his sister, Pauline. Timothee and Pauline look almost identical even now, but for some reason I just see Pauline here. But overall he was fine. There wasn't really much opportunity to shine here. Timothee was in 1 episode of Law & Order in 2009. This would have been when he was around 13. If you want to watch his episode, it's season 19, episode 10. I didn't watch this episode because I don't have the streaming service the show is on. Also, it's season 19, and I've never watched an episode of Law & Order in my life, so I would have no idea what's going on. I did watch a short clip of this episode on YouTube, though. I'm sure most people know what Law & Order is. I may be the exception because this is the only thing I know about the show. To me, it's one of the many crime shows that exist out there. I'm not sure what makes this show special and different than all the others, but here's a spoiler for Timothee's episode. He plays a kid who gets offed along with his housekeeper. From the clip I saw, Timothee says like 3 sentences. The delivery wasn't the best, honestly. I feel like it sounds like an elementary school kid reading off his lines for a play.
We're gonna go to my room, so could you please not tell Mom and Dad about us playing Hexbox?
Sorry, what?
I am paying specific attention to Timothee here, though. If I was just a Law & Order fan watching this episode, I don't think I would notice anything off about his performance. Loving Leah is a Hallmark movie released in 2009. It's 95 minutes long. It's about a doctor whose brother dies and leaves a wife behind. I'm trying to explain this as best I can, but according to Jewish tradition, the doctor guy would marry his brother's widow to basically carry forth the dead brother's legacy. This is called levirate marriage and apparently isn't practiced very much these days. So the doctor marries his brother's widow, which at first was out of duty, but eventually they grow to really love each other. Basically the same romance trope in every Hallmark movie. I'd categorize this as a romance drama movie. Hallmark movies can be very generic and boring for me, so it helps a lot when there's actors that I love or at least know in it. Of note to me, this movie has Lauren Ambrose and Natasha Lyonne in it. This movie came after Can't Hardly Wait and 6 Feet Under, and before Servant for Lauren Ambrose, and after American Pie and before Orange is the New Black for Natasha Lyonne. So this film was lucky to catch both of these women in a brief lull in their careers. Lauren Ambrose plays Leah. Adam Kaufman plays Jake, the doctor who marries Leah. Natasha Lyonne isn't in very much of the movie, but she plays Esther, Leah's sister. Ricky Lake also plays a minor role as Leah's new rabbi. Loving Leah was directed by Jeff Bleckner and written by Nina Goldstein. Where Timothee comes in is he plays young Jake. In these very early works, he is a baby. He's in the movie for probably 1 minute. It's a flashback of a conversation Jake had with his brother when they were kids.
No matter what.
No matter what.
Say amen.
Amen.
It's a touching little scene. Again, not much to comment on, but it's an important scene to get background on the two brothers' relationship. Now let me say a few words about this movie, unrelated to Timothee's 1 minute cameo in this thing. It was not my favorite, which is common for Hallmark movies. I don't know how it's possible to spend 90 minutes with these characters and still feel so little for them. It's a classic Hallmark problem, along with the insta-love romance that I never buy into. I did like how the movie was about a Jewish family and Jewish culture. At least from my experience with Hallmark Christmas movies, it's rare for them to portray anything that isn't the normal average American life. It was an interesting concept too, having to marry your dead brother's wife. Usually that's a concept for a horror movie, but I think this was decently well done in the sense that it surprisingly didn't feel too creepy or weird. I also liked that it didn't focus completely on the romance. It also had to do with grieving the brother properly. There was a mix in performance quality as well. Lauren Ambrose was too good for this. Most actors were average, but there were a few people that were quite bad, which again isn't abnormal for a Hallmark movie. Just for reference, I like looking at the Rotten Tomatoes score. There's no critic score, but the audience score is 72%, which is way higher than what I would rate it. I would give this 1 Timothee dab. He's barely in it and didn't have much to work with. Enjoyment-wise, I give this 2 peaches. It was a slog to get through, as is pretty much the case for every other Hallmark movie I've watched, but it wasn't totally terrible. Timothee was in 4 episodes of the show Royal Pains. Here are the episodes he's in if you want to watch them yourselves. I didn't watch the full episodes for the reasons I named earlier, but I was able to find some clips. This was in 2012, so this was 3 years after his previous project. Here he was probably around 16. This is also where he starts looking more like the Timothee we know today. If I didn't already know Timothee was in the earlier projects like Loving Leah and Law & Order, I would not recognize him at all.
I hate to say it, I hope I don't sound ridiculous. I don't know who this man is.
Here I can easily tell it's him. This is a big turning point in his career, I think. It's his most significant role yet. The other roles, it was difficult to get a good read on his talents because they were pretty generic roles, not much material for him to work with. Here he's playing a more fleshed out character. He's a little awkward and nerdy, but at the same time funny and endearing.
See for yourself. Come on, I'll take you to her. Quincy's her name. She's super rad. That surf lingo I've been trying to learn. Wait till you meet her.
It's a different character than the ones he's played before, but it's also different than the roles we know him for now, where he's more brooding and serious, but sensitive. It reminds me a little bit of Evan Peters' career trajectory, where he's known now for playing dark roles, but he got his start playing nerdy, goofy teen boy characters. Here we get to see his acting chops in action. He seems very confident when delivering his lines, where in the past he felt a little stiff, like he was reading off a script. This show was a medical drama, so you know his character is gonna get sick.
It's not safe there. There are so many noises and lights.
He gets sick, and we get to see how his personality changes very suddenly and drastically. In the same year as Royal Pains, Timothee was also in 8 episodes of the crime drama TV show Homeland. Here are the exact episodes he was in if you're interested in watching those. Again, I only watched clips of him in these episodes. You can easily tell what kind of character he plays just by the way he looks. His father is the vice president, so he's like a rich, preppy kid that acts out because he wants attention. This role is another step up from Royal Pains, going from 4 episodes to 8. I think there's also a significant difference between playing a victim or patient in a crime medical drama versus playing a character with development and that contributes to the storyline. Again, this role is a little different than the ones he plays these days. I guess nowadays he's kind of typecast as a good guy, and at this point it was the first time he was playing a villain, or at least an ethically complicated character. He's also bringing some of that Timmy T swag to this role. I can see in this role him continuing to get more and more comfortable with performing. He's showing off what he can do. In one of the episodes he gets mad, and I can see the intensity that he's capable of delivering.
Are you crazy? What is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? What the fuck is wrong?
Next, Timothy was in something called Trooper, which was released in 2013. This was the year after Homeland, and Timothy would have been 17 or so. There's not much information about this. I can't even find any pictures. IMDb lists this as a TV movie, but it seems like this was a pilot for a TV show that wasn't picked up. IMDb says this was a drama and has this to say for the plot. A sensible mother becomes a New York State trooper. Timothy played a character named Lee Flaxton, and Mira Sorvino played KJ Flaxton. Jay Hernandez, who I know from Hostel, was also in this playing a character named Carlos. I'm guessing Mira is the mom that becomes the New York State Trooper, and Timothy is her son. This was written by Aaron Eli Collette and written by Craig Gillespie, who has directed projects such as Cruella and I, Tonya. Timothy made his feature film debut in Men, Women, and Children, which was a comedy drama film released in 2014 when Timothy was around 18. This movie is basically like one of those compilation movies with a bunch of different characters and stories and relationships, like He's Just Not That Into You and Valentine's Day. Here's the summary on IMDb. A group of high school teenagers and their parents attempt to navigate the many ways the internet has changed their relationships, their communications, their self-images, and their love lives. I'm going to come right out and say it. Timothy was barely in this movie. I did see his name in the opening credits, so that is an accomplishment, I guess. He plays a guy on the football team. We don't get to see much of Timothy, but again, he's playing a bully, so it's not the typical role we see him in these days. We see him in the background at some of the football games or football practices, and then in the lunchroom and in a classroom. I think he literally had one line and was beat up by Ansel Elgort's character.
Everybody cares. Everybody.
All right, yeah, whatever.
I'm not going to say it's a downgrade from his previous work, because it's definitely a big step to be in a movie at all, and such a high-profile movie as well. But as far as Timothy's performance, there isn't really much to speak about. I'm going to keep talking about this movie, even though Timothy was in this thing for like 30 seconds out of the 2-hour runtime. I tend to somewhat like these kinds of compilation movies, is what I'm calling them. I think they're usually pretty fun. I'm always really impressed when a movie is able to gather up such an all-star cast. The downside is that with so many characters, it can be difficult to dive deep into the characters or their stories. Let's do a speed run of the big names in the cast really quick. Jennifer Garner, Adam Sandler, Caitlin Dever, Ansel Elgort, Judy Greer, Dean Norris, Rosemarie DeWitt, Emma Thompson, J.K. Simmons, and of course Timothee Chalamet. Good for Jason Reitman for again casting J.K. Simmons as the dad with a pregnant teenage daughter.
You were pregnant?
How can that even happen?
Sorry, Daddy.
Don't daddy me.
The film is based on a book by Chad Kultgen. The film is directed by Jason Reitman, who is probably best known for directing Up in the Air and Juno. I really liked this movie, which surprised me. I just found the concept really interesting, seeing how each parent and child dynamic was shown through and potentially caused by their internet activity, what the child chooses to do on the internet, and how much the parents moderate or participate in those activities, and just how these modern day conveniences have reshaped day-to-day interactions, and how people can be talking to each other, but at the same time they're not really talking to each other. I don't think this movie is subtle in the themes it's touching on, but I also don't think it's laughably stereotypical or obvious, as some critics seem to say. I wasn't too deeply connected to these characters, to the point where I would cry or anything like that. That's usually my metric of whether I'm emotionally invested. The closest I got to crying was this really sad scene with Ansel Elgort texting Caitlin Dever. So I wasn't too emotionally affected, but I was really interested in the story and seeing how these stories would intertwine and resolve. I liked some of the background music. One big complaint I have is about the aesthetics of this film. The aesthetics are just super boring. The title is pretty boring, and visually the cinematography doesn't draw me in. I would absolutely never voluntarily click play on this movie. It looks like such a generic adult movie. I would also expect a tad more visual creativity from Jason Reitman, just based off of my experience with Juno. Maybe it's unfair of me to expect that visual originality from a director. Maybe that lies more with the cinematographer, but the visuals are just disappointing when you pit the two films together. I think the visuals are a pretty big deal for me. I love a good story, but I think what makes it stick in my memory long term is the visuals. I really liked the story, but I think I'll forget about this movie pretty fast because there's nothing for me to grasp onto visually. I don't know if it's just me, but I have never heard of this movie before. With a cast like that and a director with a good track record like that, I would think that this film would be a pretty big deal, but it looks like it bombed pretty hard. This movie had a budget of $16 million and made $2.2 million at the box office. Mind you, this was back in 2014. And again, I've never heard of it, and I don't even know how that's possible. Maybe that was the issue. They didn't spend enough on advertising. If there's a main character in this film, it would probably be Ansel Elgort. Men, Women, and Children was released right on the heels of the Fault in Our Stars film, and even Ansel Elgort and the Fault in Our Stars stans couldn't save this thing. I was shocked and flabbergasted when I went on Rotten Tomatoes to see how this film did, and it has a 33% critic score and 44% audience score. Loving Leah has a higher audience score than this. It gets me a little heated, like, I really don't know how I got this so wrong. I really liked this movie. Maybe one day I'll do a defense of this movie, because I really don't understand most of the critiques that this film gets. I give this a Timothee factor of 1 out of 5. He was in this the least he possibly could without being considered an extra, and the material he did have wasn't too special. On an enjoyment level, I'd give this film 3.5 out of 5 peaches. The same year, 2014, Timothee was also in another film called Worst Friends. There's limited information out there about this film, but I'd assume there wasn't a theatrical release. This movie is about two childhood friends, one popular mean boy and one nice nerdy boy. A few years after high school, the unlikely duo is reunited again when the popular guy gets in an accident and the nice nerdy friend has to take care of him for a bit. IMDb categorizes this as a comedy, drama, and romance. I'd say it's a straight comedy and not done very well, as I will get into. This one is bad, y'all. I had to go back and raise my enjoyment score to 2 out of 5 for Loving Leah, because that one was mostly just boring. This one is just unbearably bad. I don't like being mean in my critiques, and it's obviously nothing personal, but this is probably one of the worst movies I've ever seen. There's not really anything redeeming about it. Timothee isn't in very much of this movie. The movie's really short, 1 hour and 15 minutes long. Timothee's in the first scene and another scene near the end, probably for 2 minutes total. So still not enough to make it worth it to watch this movie, but it is more screen time than he was given in Men, Women, and Children.
Are you kidding me? Those are high school girls, Jake.
Listen,
Here he plays the nerdy younger version of the main character, who also happens to be Jewish. It's interesting in these early roles how he seemed to flip back and forth between either the rude popular kid and the shy nerdy kid. It's also interesting that at this point in his career he'd already played 2 Jewish characters. I don't know if he identifies as being Jewish, but I did look it up, and according to my sources, he does have Jewish heritage. Again, he was fine here. There's not much to judge his performance on yet. Timothee seems to somehow have aged backwards here. He would have been 18 when this film came out, but he looks to be a little older than he was in Loving Leah, which he was in when he was around 13. So my only guess is that this movie may have been stuck in development hell for a while. I have some thoughts I want to share about this movie, unrelated to Timothee's performance. There's no notable cast members in this film, at least from what I can tell. Most of the actors only have a few lesser known things on their IMDb pages. One interesting fact I found is that Richard Tan, who plays Jake, the more popular friend, directed the 2020 film Chemical Hearts, which I really liked. Ralph Arendt directed this film and wrote the screenplay. He also doesn't have much on his IMDb page, but he does have some College Humor episodes listed on there, which I think tells you all you need to know. This feels like a YouTuber movie. It's odd all around, from the editing, the color grading, the bad acting, and very basic unfunny jokes. Both of the main characters are unlikable, but one is way worse than the other. This is like if you took the most unlikable main character from an American Pie, National Lampoon movie, but it's 10 years too late, and there's no redeeming qualities, like actually being funny. The writing also comes from the Shane Dawson School of Surface Level Character Development, where the asshole main character is an unbearable asshole because he has daddy issues. I do want to caveat this whole review by saying I recognize this isn't a big budget movie, so I'm not trying to shit on it too much. Also, I'm just a critic here. I haven't made a movie. I have no idea how hard it is to do, so take all I'm saying with a grain of salt. Timothee factor is a 1 dab out of 5. He's barely in this one yet again. Enjoyment level is 1 peach out of 5. I would give it 0 if I could. In the same year, Timothee was in a 13-minute short film called Spinners. To explain this short, I need to explain the whole thing, so spoilers. These two kids are sign spinners, they're bullied, and then try to buy a gun from an unhoused single mom. This is available to watch on YouTube, so that's pretty nice. The short film was directed by Eric L. Barnes, who doesn't seem to have done much else, according to his IMDb. Again, Timothee's flipping back all the way to the other side of the spectrum with this character. That Timothee swag is on full display here.
Hey! Bang, 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 bang.
Since this is a short, I'm not gonna rate it with dabs or peaches. I didn't love it though. I also didn't hate it. It's hard to feel too strongly negatively or positively about something that's so short. I don't need to spend much time introducing the next film, but some of you might not remember that Timothee was in it. Interstellar. This was his 4th and final project of 2014, so it was a big year for Timothee. This is a Christopher Nolan movie, and therefore comes along with a plot that is hard to explain, so I'm not really going to attempt to summarize it. I'm just going to read you the IMDb summary. A team of explorers travel through a wormhole in space in an attempt to ensure humanity's survival. I'd call this a drama sci-fi film, and it was a whopping 2 hours and 49 minutes long. First, let's talk about the cast. These people don't need much introduction either. Matthew McConaughey, Anne Hathaway, Jessica Chastain, John Lithgow, Michael Caine, Mackenzie Foy, and of course Timothee Chalamet. I could go on with the cast, but I'll stop it there. I'm just saying, but Mackenzie Foy will always be a Renesmee to me. Timothee plays the young version of Matthew McConaughey's son. This film was directed by Christopher Nolan, well known for high-concept, big-budget, well-respected films like Tenet, Inception, and The Dark Knight, so this was definitely a big step in Timothee's career. Men, Women, and Children was a big deal too, but to me there's a difference between a grounded drama comedy and a conceptual epic. This film was also written by Christopher Nolan and his brother Jonathan. Timothee was not in too much of the film. I know Timothee was a little disappointed when he saw how small his part ended up being, but I think his role was definitely nothing to scoff at.
And I saw it and I loved it, but then I went home to my dad and I like wept for an hour.
Why?
Because I just figured my part was like bigger or something.
Oh,
I don't know.
no.
He had some lines and some significant screen time, but the character is a little bland, which makes sense. His character is meant to be a supporting character, and the characters here are going to be more realistic. There's no comic book villains or cartoonish comedians, so between his grounded character, the minimal lines, there again isn't much to judge his performance on.
Travel safely.
You look after our place for me, all right? All right?
Uh-huh.
I don't know if this is something I caught on to specifically because I'm here for Timothee, but Timothee's character is very neglected in the context of the story. The story is more about the connection between father and daughter. Matthew McConaughey's character clearly has a favorite child, and it's not Timothee, to the extent that it was actually sad how little the son is mentioned. McConaughey's daughter is the one he works with on all the space puzzles and equations. Meanwhile, Timothee is nowhere to be seen. Brief spoiler for Interstellar, so, giving you a few seconds to plug your ears. But near the end, when McConaughey is reunited with the rest of civilization, he's all excited to see his daughter, but there's, no mention of the son. It's so sad, but I'm laughing. As for the rest of the movie, the guy that plays the older version of Timothee looked spot on. Jessica Chastain being the older version of Mackenzie Foy is questionable. They look nothing alike. But the main reason why I'm pointing out some weird casting choices is mostly because of the weird age disparities. I'm not going to get into it all because it's kind of a lot, but the age of the actors and the characters just didn't work. Just as one example, they expect me to buy that Michael Caine, who was around 81 when this movie came out, is still going to be alive 25 or so years later. I really liked the movie though. It did lose me a little bit near the end. It gets too convoluted and confusing for my taste. Trademark for Nolan, but it's not my favorite. I have no idea how, but I predicted one of the big reveals at the end, so I just wanted to bring that up since I'm proud of that. This wasn't really what I expected from this movie at all. I think I expected it to be more of a boring space movie like Apollo 13. I thought this would be a movie set in our modern world and time, just about building a rocket to the moon. But this is a weird space movie. It's kind of post-apocalyptic, an alternate reality, extreme space travel going through black holes and other galaxies, and time bending. I'm not really into space-related things in general, but I was really interested in the world building. There were a lot of really cool shots and visuals, and the background music was memorable. There were also some lines that really caught my attention.
Once you're a parent, you're the ghost of your children's future.
I could keep going for a while with all my thoughts and questions, but I have to cut myself off there. This obviously has a very good Rotten Tomatoes score, 73% for critics, 86% for audience. I'm glad something finally beat Loving Leah. Now we know definitively that Timothee's career didn't peak with a Hallmark movie. I think for the first time I have to give out 2 dabs for Timothee factor. Wow, something more than 1. Although he was playing a minor character and didn't have much emotion to deliver, it is a significant step up here where we know his name and a little bit about who he is and how he contributes to the storyline. For enjoyment, I'll give this 4 out of 5 peaches. I really liked it at the beginning, but it lost me a tad near the end. I'm not really going to pretend that I fully understand what it's about or what exactly happened, but I was in for the ride. It's impressive in so many ways, but it didn't really affect me on an emotional level at all. Next is probably the most notable film in Timothee's career thus far. 1 and 2 was released in 2015. Timothee would have been around 19 when this was released. This film is a little difficult to explain, but I'd say it's in the drama supernatural genre. I wouldn't say it's even partly a thriller, as IMDb suggests. It's 90 minutes long. It has an indie vibe, which I'd say is pretty unique for a film with some fantasy elements. It's about this family that lives this traditional lifestyle, but the kids have these powers that they are forced to suppress. The main character is probably Kiernan Shipka, with Timothee being the next biggest character. Kiernan has been in quite a few things, even at her young age. I'd say she is mostly known for her TV roles in Mad Men and Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. Kiernan and Timothee play siblings. Again, I think Kiernan had the main role, but the film end credits list Timothee first and Kiernan second, which I thought was strange since Kiernan was the main character and the bigger star at the time. But good for Timothee's agent or manager or whoever for getting him listed first. This all conflicts with the poster though, which lists Kiernan first and Timothee second. Anyway, sorry for the tangent, I just wanted to point out that mystery. Elizabeth Reeser and Grant Bowler play their parents. Just saying, but Elizabeth Reeser will always be Esme to me. This film was directed by Andrew Dros Palermo, who is usually more of a cinematographer, working on projects like The Green Knight and VHS. The film was co-written by Andrew Dros Palermo and Nima Shadadi. The reason why I say this is one of the most notable films in Timothee's career is because this is the first film where he's a main character. Most of his earlier projects, he's playing a young version of the main character in a flashback, or he's the son of the main character. He really is given so much to work with in this role. Casting was done by Sig De Miguel and Stephen Vincent. I wanted to specifically call them out and give them props, because they are who I would credit with discovering Timothee, or at least for giving him a chance to really show what he can do, and that he could hold his weight in a leading role. And it must be a hard job because I found it really difficult to judge his potential in the previous roles he did. There wasn't much there to judge his performance on. Let me talk a bit more about Timothee's performance now. Not only does he have a lot of screen time in this film, he also has a lot of emotional range he needs to show. It's not just a silly little comedy or a light little rom-com or a subtle realistic piece. It's very heightened situations and elevated emotions. His performance here gave everything we needed to know he'll succeed in even more challenging roles. Unrelated to Timothee's performance, I did like this movie. It wasn't what I expected at all. I didn't expect the fantasy elements. From the poster and the title, I thought it was maybe a romance, but it ends up being about brother and sister. Oops. I thought it had lots of potential, but it ended up feeling a little bit underdeveloped. My favorite part was seeing the relationship between the brother and sister, and that definitely is where the film shines. But again, I wish they had developed that a bit more with the story, because the plot feels pretty thin. I liked the idea of the themes and messages being forced to suppress who you are in order to fit in or please your parents, but it did feel a little cliche and obvious for my personal taste, and again the themes felt simplistic, partly due to how underdeveloped the plot felt. While the film feels a little empty in these aspects, it is at least partially made up for because of how beautiful it is with the cinematography and setting and music. I also just wanted to point out this one scene where I'm trying to take the scene seriously, but I just can't with the horse's eye like that. But I have to emphasize again that I did like this film, and I didn't expect to like it as much as I did. But I am a little disappointed because it feels like this movie could have been really great, but there's just a few things missing there for me. Just for reference, Rotten Tomatoes gives this a 47% for critic score and 35% for audience score, which I feel is just unnecessarily harsh. I agree with some of the criticisms, but I think there's enough heart there and aesthetic interest and great acting performances to keep this in the fresh zone. But I guess that's just me. For Timothee's performance, I give this 4 out of 5 dabs. I think this film is a must-see for Timothee fans because this is the one that I think changed everything in his career trajectory. Not only is it an important milestone in his career, he also in general has a lot of screen time, and his character is put through the ringer, so we get to see a lot of dramatics out of him. As for my enjoyment of the film, I'd give it 3.5 out of 5. The next film is a doozy. It is a regression from the last films in more than one way. Timothy's next project was the Adderall Diaries, and I am going to be pretty negative with this one, so I'm just warning you now. The Adderall Diaries was released the same year as 1 and 2 in 2015. It's a 1 hour, 27-minute film based on an autobiographical novel by the same name. IMDb lists this as a crime, drama, thriller. I'd say it's just a drama. It's about an author who decides to cover a murder case which causes him to reevaluate his troubled past and addictions. This film was directed by Pamela Romanowski, who has mostly directed some episodes of TV here and there. Pamela was credited as the writer, as well as Stephen Elliott, who wrote the novel the film is based on. This does have a stacked cast, though quite a few of those choices have not aged well, and that's all I'm going to say on that. The cast has too many people for me to talk about what else you may have seen them in, but it stars James Franco, Ed Harris, Amber Heard, Christian Slater, Cynthia Nixon, and Wilmer Valderrama. As usual, let's start with Timothy's performance. This role was pretty disappointing. First of all, it's a step back in the sense that now he's back to playing the young version of the main character. This role is a little frustrating for me because there is a ton to work with here. He's playing the teen version of James Franco's character. He's a teen boy who went through all of this trauma and abuse and started acting out, doing drugs and committing crimes. So there's a lot of really dramatic stuff he needs to do. But the problem comes down to the editing. Timothy is in this film a decent amount, but it's really hard to get a read on his character or performance. All of Timothy's scenes are shown as if they are memories. These scenes are hazy, scattered, short glimpses, and this totally makes sense in the context of the story. The film is all about reflecting on your past and your memories and unpacking how memories, or your interpretation of events, can be unreliable. So it makes sense why stylistically they chose to portray flashbacks or memories the way they did, but it keeps me at a distance from Timothy's performance, which is a problem for me here, obviously, when I'm putting a microscope on everything Timothy does, but it's also a problem for the wider story since I don't feel any sort of connection to the character. Also, his wig is bad. Okay, so I can't confirm or deny whether he's wearing a wig, but I think he is. And even if it's just hairstyling, it looks so bad. I can't. It's not just him. Amber Heard wears a wig that also doesn't look the best. Her wig is not as comically bad as Timothy's, though. The film as a whole is just bad, in my opinion. The bigger problem here, I think, is the story. It doesn't feel like it wants to commit to any one thing, and it ends up doing everything poorly. The court case felt so irrelevant until the last second. The whole film felt pretty unoriginal. It felt like it had nothing new to say, again, until the last maybe 10 minutes. And I really liked the message, but it was not done well here at all. The last scene felt so cheesy. Stylistically, I really hated how they walked us through the end of film revelation. I do think the problem is how it was adapted from page to screen, though. I'm really interested in reading the book. I think it would be much better. The film also weirdly feels like it's glamorizing drug use and addiction. Even though Steven's life starts going down the tubes, it still feels like his drug use and lifestyle are fun and cool. Maybe because of how long it takes for these things to start causing a negative impact on his life. I think it also has to do with how the romance ties into the story, as well as the overall aesthetic of these scenes. I'm not usually a James Franco hater. I'm not talking about any of his real-life drama, but his performance here felt pretty underwhelming in one note. Ed Harris, though, was a standout. I was very impressed by his performance. This was one of the only good things about this movie.
Come on, hit me! You want to kill me so bad? Hit me! Come on, hit me! I deserve it! Come on, hit me! Hit me! Hit me! Hit me! Come on! Hit me!
This film was also just boring. It was a slog even at just 87 minutes long. In this case, Rotten Tomatoes agrees with me. 25% for critic score, 27% for audience score. I know some people don't like to put a lot of weight into A24. It's just a production company. But that's not me. I love A24, and I'm 5 times as likely to see a movie if I see that it's by A24. But not all A24 movies are hits, and this is one that was a huge bomb for me. As for Timothee rating, I give this 1.5 out of 5 dabs. As I said before, this doesn't really have to do with his acting performance, but it's more about the editing choices. It's frustrating. He's in it a decent amount, he has good material to work with, but it's hard to get a read on what he's doing. Enjoyment-wise, I give this 1 out of 5 peaches. It's boring, it's annoying, and the message and focus are unclear for most of the runtime. Timothee's third project of 2015 was Love the Coopers. This is a Christmas romantic comedy film in the style of a compilation film, as I described it earlier with Men, Women, and Children, where it's a bunch of different characters and storylines that all link together somehow. It's an hour 47 minutes long. Again, with this type of movie, there is a star-studded cast. Diane Keaton, John Goodman, Ed Helms, Alex Borstein, Amanda Seyfried, Alan Arkin, Marissa Tomei, Olivia Wilde, Jake Lacey, Anthony Mackie, and Steve Martin as the narrator. The film was directed by Jessie Nelson, who doesn't seem to have done too much in this realm, to be honest, but she has recently collaborated with Sarah Bareilles on Little Voice and Waitress, which I love. This film was written by Stephen Rogers, who has also written I, Tonya, P.S. I Love You, and Hope Floats. Now, this is going to be the first time I have to say something more negative about Timothee's performance. In this movie, he plays an ultra-awkward, horny teenager named Charlie. Charlie's plotline entirely revolves around liking this girl. His storyline is probably one of the more minor parts of the film. I think part of the problem is that the film seems to heavily rely on Charlie for comedic moments. There are moments that are supposed to be funny throughout, like in a chuckle rom-com kind of way. But Charlie's storyline and Timothee's performance were very over the top in a kind of American Pie kind of way that didn't really fit the tone of the rest of the movie. A lot of the time it's hard for me to tell if someone is a bad actor or if it's the directing or editing or filming, so I do usually give a lot of leeway for the acting. I know how great of an actor Timothee is, so maybe that's one of the reasons I give him the benefit of the doubt here, but I definitely think at least part of the issue is coming from somewhere else. Charlie's sections of the movie are so tonally off from the rest of the movie, beyond just Timothee's performance, so I can imagine the director telling him to ham up his performance to be more in line with a raunchy teen comedy. The parts where he has dialogue I think work well enough, but the background acting is where it becomes a real problem. It's bad, I'm sorry.
Why can't you stop fighting? Why won't you stop? No, right. That's a bus.
Oh.
I think I'm turning.
Some of the other actors who have quite good track records had some questionable moments in this film as well, which is another reason why I feel like some other factors may be at play for how off Timothee's performance was here for me. If I wasn't specifically watching this movie for Timothee, though, I don't think I would have noticed it all, really.
Oh, yeah, no, of course. Right, my text. Text girls all the time. That's what I do.
This is such a minor character, and the material for the character was so much lighter than the rest that I would expect that a subpar performance wouldn't make much difference. The rest of the movie was not great for me either. It's interesting to be watching a Christmas movie in spring. I think in general it's hard for new Christmas movies to stand out. They feel pretty generic and low effort most of the time, and there's a very low likelihood that it'll ever compare to the many other Christmas movies we love and like to watch annually. As a Christmas movie, this movie doesn't really deliver. It just didn't feel Christmassy enough. And as a rom-com, it wasn't memorable either. That's probably the worst part, how boring the film was. It's hard to explain what this film is about since there are so many characters and stories, but generally the movie is about family and each family member's journey, physically and mentally, of going home for Christmas. As can be a common issue with these types of movies, we don't spend enough time with each character for me to care about them, and their stories weren't particularly interesting or meaningful for me to care either. It doesn't help that 2 of the characters I found to be very annoying. Olivia Wilde plays probably one of the more important characters. She is the daughter of Diane Keaton and John Goodman's characters, and her storyline is about traveling back home for Christmas, and she meets a traveling soldier in the airport, and they spend the day together, and she procrastinates going back home to her parents. This character was just insufferable, mostly because she gives off extreme, not like other girls energy. Every other word she says is a sarcastic quip, and it gets old really fast. She's supposed to be likable but real because she makes some mistakes sometimes. And then we learn about her hidden baggage that causes her to act the way she does, and then we're supposed to understand her and like her again. But no, I just never liked her. It's a similar story with Marissa Tomei's character. She is the younger sister of Diane Keaton's character. Her storyline revolves around her being detained on the way to meet her family for Christmas. Again, here she has her faults, but for the most part she's supposed to be likable. She's portrayed as quirky, but I just found her to be a bad person.
You feel alone with 3 teenagers?
Oh, them, no, I lied. I don't have any kids. I don't even have a husband.
What?
Like, you're not cute, you're just an asshole. Both of these characters were also involved in storylines that I found to be a little problematic, or at the very least haven't aged well, in my opinion. Marissa Tomei's character basically steals for no reason and then manipulates her way out of the situation, and it just felt very out of touch, at least in today's political climate. This storyline is told in a way of like, oh, this character did this silly little thing and got in more trouble than she intended, but she was able to talk her way out of it, and now it's just a fun little story that she can tell people about the time she was arrested. It's hard for me not to think about how impossible this storyline would be if the character and actress was a person of color. And I'm not trying to cancel the movie or anything like that, it was just a storyline that rubbed me the wrong way. And while watching, I just couldn't detach my feelings about current real-world issues. I always have to put disclaimers on stuff like this because I do give the intention of the movie and filmmakers the benefit of the doubt. It could be that I'm reading too much into it, and it is just supposed to be a silly little Christmas movie. It could also be that things have changed in the past 8 years since the movie was released. But for me, it just seemed a little tone-deaf when watching through today's lens. On a similar note, Olivia Wilde's character has a romance with Jake Lacey's character, the soldier. The biggest character traits of both of them is probably that Olivia is a Democrat and Jake is a Republican. Olivia's character is shown to be a snobby, judgmental social justice warrior, which is already annoying on its own. But my issue was more with the romance. Without trying to spoil this part of the movie, you can probably guess how their romance turns out. What I'll say is that the romance was very idealistic and naive. I do think this part just didn't age well because this was pre-Trump and pre the dramatic rift that exists now between both sides of the aisle. On a more superficial level, I also just didn't like their romance. They were trying so hard to have that 500 Days of Summer IKEA moment, and it just felt so forced. The rest of the characters and storylines were very meh. Alan Arkin's character and storyline was the only one that I particularly cared for. His character goes to a restaurant every day because he's developed a relationship with one of the waitresses, but then he finds out that this is her last day before moving away. I loved Alan's performance as this grumpy but lovable grandfather figure, and I loved his relationship with the waitress. This is the only part of the movie that I found even remotely touching. This part of the story did have its own faults though, since it felt weirdly romantic at times.
Just to see you. So I could be around you.
Now I have to say goodbye again.
There were also some things that just didn't make sense. I don't know how it's possible to make such a low-stakes rom-com movie like this and still somehow have plot holes. I won't get into it though because I don't want to get into spoilers. Also, the casting doesn't make sense to some extent. Specifically, I'm talking about the ages of the characters. Ed Helms and Olivia Wilde are supposed to be siblings, but they're 10 years apart in real life. Could happen, but it's definitely not typical. But the real issue is with Marissa Tomei, Diane Keaton, and Alan Arkin's characters. Marissa Tomei and Diane Keaton are sisters, but Diane Keaton is 19 years older than Marissa in real life. Again, it's possible, but that's a real stretch, especially when we see them as kids and see that they're closer in age than that. And Alan Arkin is their dad, but Alan Arkin is only 12 years older than Diane Keaton. And these people all look their ages, so it just doesn't work. I guess overall it shouldn't matter that much, but it is something that pulls me out of, like, wait, this doesn't really make sense how they're related. And also I think it just shows how careless and low effort this movie feels. I feel pretty validated by the Rotten Tomatoes score, 18% critic and 36% audience. As for Timothy's performance, I have to give this a 1 out of 5. He was a more minor character, but he wasn't a decent amount of it, but it just was not very good in my opinion. But again, I don't necessarily fault him for it, but I do have to be honest. Enjoyment level, this was also pretty boring, so I give it 1.5 out of 5 peaches. Next in the timeline is the film Miss Stevens, released in 2016. Timothy would have been around 20 when this was released. This is a comedy drama film, 1 hour 25 minutes long, about a high school teacher who takes 3 students on a drama competition field trip. Lily Rabe plays Miss Stevens. I'm a big American Horror Story fan, so I love that. Timothy plays one of the students, the main student on the field trip. Lily Reinhart plays another student. I'm a big Riverdale fan, so again, I love that. And the third student is Anthony Quintal, also known as Lohanthony for my fellow children of the internet. That was super crazy to see. I have no idea how he got involved with this movie. The film was directed by Julia Hart. Julia Hart was also the writer of the film, along with her husband, Jordan Horowitz. Julia Hart also directed and wrote the screenplay for Stargirl, which I did think was a cute film. Jordan Horowitz is usually more of a producer. Timothy plays a slightly different character here. Here, he's kind of a troubled class clown. He is in the film a decent amount, but the main character is definitely Miss Stevens. Most of the time, he's playing a pretty realistic teenager. Honestly, nothing really stood out too much to me, and that's probably more of a writing thing. He does have a few scenes toward the end where he gets to show off a little bit.
I stole myself out of every good job since high school, and I never got anywhere. Because you blew me so full of hot air.
And his performance in those scenes were truly incredible. And that's the kind of thing I love to see. I'm sure there's more subtle ways to assess an actor's performance, but I love those more dramatic moments. I love when I can see an actor completely lose themselves in the character or the emotion. As for the rest of the movie, it was okay. I liked the indie vibe, which I can't really put into words. It was very slice of life too, which was a nice change of pace for me. To just see this very average few days in the life of this teacher and her students. It was a little too slice of lifey for me though, because there didn't seem to be much of a point to the movie. There didn't seem to be much in terms of character development or story or theme. I'm sure there was a point to it all, but it's subtle, I think. And this wasn't a movie I wanted to think about so hard. And it was a tad boring, so I probably stopped paying attention as much as I could have. Lohanthony was surprisingly good in this. I really enjoyed watching Lily Reinhart. This character is similar in a lot of ways to Betty, but Lily played this so differently, it almost felt like a completely different actress, so I was kind of impressed. And she looked absolutely beautiful here. It was also refreshing to see Lily in an outfit and hairstyle different than what she usually wears as Betty. But there was this one outfit that was exactly a Betty outfit and hairstyle. This one has a pretty good Rotten Tomatoes score. I'm kind of surprised by how good it is. Critic score is 91% and audience score is 70%. I give it 3 out of 5 Timothy dabs. He's in the film a little bit more. Most of what he's given is slightly bland character work, but there are some moments he's given to shine. Enjoyment-wise, I give it a 3 out of 5 as well. It was fine. I don't think it was the most memorable film ever. And that's it for this video. Here we covered years 2008 to 2016, 15 IMDb credits total, 3 shorts, 4 TV credits, and 8 movies. It was really fun for me to dive into this era of Timothee's career, what I'm calling his unknown era. I think all of the eras will be fun in their own ways, but I think this one is super interesting because we get to see his earliest work, how he got his start in these little projects here and there, projects that most of us probably haven't seen. It's also fun to see his early projects that are almost like his cute little baby pictures or home videos. It's interesting to see the progression of the types of roles he was typically given and the progression of how much he's given to work with. There were some really good movies in here that I probably wouldn't have watched on my own that I'm glad this video exposed me to. There were a couple of stinkers, but those were few and far between. As far as Timothee's contribution to these films, they're pretty minimal for the most part, which is again why I'm calling this his unknown era, because most of his roles here are some character in the background, or a character with a line or two, or commonly a son of the main character, or a younger version of the main character. Most of these roles he's in a background or supporting role. He wasn't ever the star at this point with the name that brings people into seats. At the end of the series on Timothee, I might do some statistics or rankings on everything I watched, but if I had to award one movie as the definitive Timothee role or film of this era, the one that changed everything, I would have to give it to 1 and 2, which I also think is really interesting because I think a lot of people won't even have heard of this movie. I think as a film, it's a little underrated in general, and it's also really interesting to watch as a Timothee fan to see the first role where he was given a chance to display his talents and set the path for some of his most iconic roles that we'll see later on. At this point in his career, most of the films he's barely in, so you would probably be better off just watching some clips. But 1 and 2 is where it changed completely for him, I think. And the nice thing about this era too is that most of these credits, or at least the films, are available on free streaming apps like Tubi or Roku, so they're there to check out if you're interested. I'm really excited to dive into the next phase in his career. There are some real bangers in there, a few that I have seen and I'm excited to revisit, and some that I haven't seen before and am excited to watch for the first time. That's it for this video. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you've watched any of these early projects of Timothee's and what you think of these movies, of Timothee's performance, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!